Good morning, grade 8. This is your English teacher, Miss Maya, and today we are going to see a new grammar lesson, Chapter 12, Adjective Clauses, Lesson 12.1, Adjective Clauses Introduction. Actually, the first question that comes to everyone's mind is, what are adjective clauses? So today's lesson objectives are define and identify an adjective. You already know what an adjective is. Of course, we are only going to review where an adjective comes and what it does to the noun. The second objective is identify the position of an adjective, and the last one and the most important one is introduce clauses in general and adjective clauses in particular. Let's look at the grammar terminology. Number 1, I met a man. This is an independent clause and it is a complete sentence. Number 2, he lives in Chicago. This is again an independent clause that can form a complete sentence because it can stand on its own. 3, who lives in Chicago? This is a dependent clause because it doesn't have a complete meaning to make a complete sentence. In number 4, I met a man who lives in Chicago. This is a combination of the independent clause and the dependent clause, and together they make a complete sentence. In conclusion, a clause is a structure that has a subject and a verb. However, there are two kinds of them, independent and dependent. So as we saw, an independent clause is a main clause and can stand alone as a sentence, as in 1 and 2. A dependent clause, as in 3, cannot stand alone as a sentence. It must be connected to an independent clause, as in number 4. So now, what are adjective clauses? What is an introduction to them? Before we talk about adjective clauses, we have to remember that an adjective modifies a noun. That is, it makes slight changes. So an adjective describes or gives information about the noun, and usually it comes in front of a noun. For example, in A and B, I met a kind man. Kind is an adjective that describes the noun man. In B, I met a famous man. Again, famous is an opinion adjective that comes in front of man to give information about the man. So it is an adjective. What is an adjective clause now? As adjectives modify nouns, an adjective clause modifies a noun too. However, an adjective clause follows a noun. It is connected to the noun it modifies. Let's look at examples C, D, and E. In C, I met a man who is kind to everybody. Who is kind to everybody is an adjective clause that is connected to the noun man. So the adjective clause in this sentence modifies or describes the noun man. In D, I met a man who is a famous poet. Who is a famous poet is also an adjective clause that describes the noun man. In E, I met a man who lives in Chicago. This is also an adjective clause that describes the noun man. In conclusion, an adjective clause, like any other dependent clause, begins with a subject and is followed by a verb. However, it doesn't have a complete meaning and cannot stand on its own. In examples C and D, who is the subject pronoun that is followed by the verb is. In E, who is the subject pronoun that introduces the adjective clause and is followed by the action verb lives. If you want to learn more about adjective clauses, please look at the following examples. Who is a dermatologist? A dermatologist is a doctor who or that treats skin problems. Number 2, who is a pediatrician? A pediatrician is a doctor who or that treats children. Number 3, who is a surgeon? A surgeon is a doctor who or that performs operations. Conclusion: who or that are used as subject pronouns to introduce adjective clauses to describe people. If you notice in the 3 examples above, who treats skin problems, who treats children, who or that performs operations, the 3 of them are adjective clauses that describe the word doctor, the same word doctor. These 3 adjective clauses do not describe dermatologist, pediatrician, or surgeon. I insist that they describe the word doctor as they attach themselves to the noun they modify. Thank you for today's session. I only want you to get an idea about adjective clauses, their structure and position. We will study them more in detailed sessions later on.